Hello, everyone, and welcome to the English Hour. Today we'll talk about language and power, and specifically language as a means and as a source of power. So, Jambak, what do you think about this approach? Do you think language is a means of power, and can language be a source of power?
First of all, I'm reminded of the first episode we shot. We talked about learning English and its importance. And I am sure we talked about this as well. Language being one of the instruments that liberates the human being the most. Gives the human being all of the tools and necessary instruments to access economic power, social power, all kinds of power. So I think in that regard, learning any language is really important because we as social beings, we need to communicate, and everything we do, the jobs that we have, the relationships that we build, everything requires the use of language. So in that regard, it's almost like electricity that powers everything else. So the more electricity you have, or the better, the more effectively you can use it, the better you get.
Well, I think most people are simply unaware of the power of language. So I think learning a foreign language and using a foreign language makes someone more sensitive to the power of language. Because, for example, when you are born into a culture, when you're born into a language, you learn it, you acquire that language without really realizing it as a baby, as a child, and then you are acculturated in that language. You go through several institutions, educational institutions and social institutions, without really, if you're not very inquisitive, you might not really think about the inner workings of language. But when you start learning a foreign language and you start hitting barriers, because in your mother tongue, you're very fluent. You are able to express very intimate things. But when you start learning a new language, you realize that there are limits to your expressive power. And then you realize that language is a key for communication. There are words, there are phrases that can really paint a picture, and sometimes you're limited. And then I think that process made me think about my own language, because when you start learning a foreign language, you start thinking about your own language more, and it impacts the way you think about language, and it impacts your understanding of your own language and your understanding of other languages and cultures. And to me, that was a very exciting sort of discovery when I was taking I think it was probably Turkish for translators or something. There were several classes that were interesting and that contributed to my understanding, or the Linguistics 101 class, in which we were really introduced to a structured analysis of language. And I think all those experiences really, especially combined with cultural courses, for example, I think I refer to that course a lot, like this cross-cultural communication course, and language being a source of power. So, I mean, if you're someone who can really put your thoughts into good words, you can express yourself. You can get other people to believe what you say. I mean, two different people might be making the same exact point, but one person sounds more credible while the other sounds maybe not credible. They might be saying the same thing, but the way you say it, the words you choose, the structures, the references that you make has a tremendous impact on your perceived credibility, on your perceived power. And in this sense, language is a means of power, right? Would you agree?
I agree, definitely. I think going back to your reference about learning a second language, I think most people don't really understand the power of language because it is so opaque to them. It is invisible. However, when you're trying to learn a new language as an adult, then you approach it with more awareness, and as a result, it becomes more transparent. The entire process becomes more transparent. And Since most of us operate on the motto of if it isn't broke, don't fix it, because we economize on energy and everything else, on resources. Since we do that, we don't really think about our first language. We never have, because we never have had to. And because of that reason, once you realize, okay, I'm trying to get something across, I'm trying to tell this person something in English, and I am not able to because I don't know how to say it. Once you come to that realization, then you understand how powerful this tool that you had at your disposal since your childhood really is. And then you come to a better appreciation of Turkish as your mother tongue, in our case. And it could be any mother tongue, but you realize how important, how valuable it is. And then you try to cultivate better linguistic skills, both in the second language that you try to learn and also in your mother tongue. So actually learning a second language improves your mother tongue by extension. And coming back to your second reference about language being a source of power, I think it is very real, and it plays out in almost any dialogue that we have with people. Our relationships, the way we approach our wives and husbands, our spouses. If you say something nicely and in a sensitive manner, it has a totally different vibe to it. If you say something with more aggressiveness, or if you lack the ability to express yourself clearly, like if everything is muddy and not really clear, then that creates confusion, in the person in front of you, and that also leads to psychological effects. It could be about your relations with your relatives, friends, co-workers, everybody.
Yeah.
So it works everywhere.
Yeah. Well, personally, I mean, this is not really discriminating against other people, but since I love languages, I love good books, I love good speech, when I meet someone, and if that person has the mastery of his language, her language, or of another language, and if that person is eloquent, then I kind of respect that person more. I find that person to be sort of more intelligent, in quotes. Mm-hmm. So there is this perceived intelligence that comes attached with a better use of language. So two people might have the same level of intelligence, the same level of IQ, but then if one of them expresses himself or herself better, has a better command of the language, then I tend to think that that person is sort of more creative, more talented, or that person can do the job better than the other person, but they might have the exact same qualifications. And I think there is maybe not an inherent value, but there's definitely perceived value and difference in the use of language and in the command of language. So, as I said, I'm not saying this to sort of discriminate anyone, but I think a lot of people have that feeling, or it's just like the old adage that goes like, "Don't judge a book by its cover." So we know that is true. It's true inherently, but whether you like it or not, you are vulnerable to human psychology. Everyone suffers from the same shortcomings that are sort of built into our system. So you might like a person on a second or third encounter, but at first, whether you like it or not, whether you intend or not, you will pay attention to his or her looks. And I think language is part of the package. And definitely. Sometimes, to me, I think I pay more attention to language than the outlook, because sometimes I see people in great clothing but with little or nothing to say, and I'm like, okay, this person is not an interesting person to me. Some other people might find that person very interesting, very attractive, and so on, but if that person cannot produce something of value verbally, or in written form, I'm like, okay, I don't have much to learn from this person, or maybe this person isn't really my type.
Yeah, yeah. I've once heard a beautiful saying about thinking and language and reading. It said, reading is assisted thinking. So, if you take a look at this saying and try to understand what it gets at, actually, thinking and reading are basically the same thing. However, when you read, you are reading the expressed thought, thought expressed in language of another person. So these are thoughts and opinions of another human being that you're reading. And the things that you read spark your imagination and your thinking ability. And these result in a kind of thinking of your own. You start to form your own opinions and interpretations about the things that you read. So when you look at language from that perspective, actually, language changes people. So it has an effect on other people. Just like reading has an effect on your mind and your perspective, your words, your spoken words, have an impact on the person that you're speaking to. And I think, just like you said, like you don't want to discriminate against people, but it's human psychology. I think that message was powerful because it happens to everybody. Just like we can talk about political crises, for example, wars and conflicts that are taking place. And, all of these people that are losing their lives, their livelihoods, their families and homes, like hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people, millions of people. But one person sends an Instagram post. One person tweets out something that expresses something about their condition in eloquent speech. And then all of the cameras across the world turn to that person and that tweet and that post. Because it expresses something and it has an effect on other people. I think that's kind of sums up the power of language quite, succinctly.
Yeah, it does. And before we started our conversation on language and power, we were discussing the role of language in politics.
Yeah.
So I think it's an area where you can really see the language and its power, because politicians and politics by its very nature requires eloquent and powerful use of language, because leaders are people who can move the masses with their words. If you are a leader, of course, there are different types and categorizations of leaders, but I think a charismatic leader, like the stereotype that comes to mind when people think about leaders, is a person who can move the masses with his or her words. And in politics, if as a politician you have the gift of gab, as they call it, if you have it, if your words penetrate the souls and the ears of your audience, then you have immense power. If millions of people believe what you say, if your words are powerful enough to permeate the country, then you are really set, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if you're a teacher and if you have the gift of gab, then your words are powerful enough to transform your students and also send them flying to new and successful careers and make them people who are going to be contributing a lot to their countries and their nations and their families. If you are a salesperson and if you have the gift of speech, then you're going to be able to sell more and you're going to make yourself and your family and your company happy. If you are somebody who's an economist, for example, you have to choose every single word that you utter very carefully, because if you're an influential person, then every single word that you utter will be having an effect on stock market prices and maybe market fluctuations across the world. And you're going to make people lose money, and some others make money like millions of dollars, in some cases even more, just by saying something positive about their company or about the economic or financial choices that they're making.
Yeah.
So that's real power.
It's very powerful. And it reminds me of the days when, as an interpreter, I was closely watching the Fed meetings.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the president of the Federal Reserve. The whole world would look into her or his mouth, like,
Yeah.
what is he or she is gonna say? I've seen two chairs up to this point. The current president of the Fed, I think, is a woman, right? I'm not quite
I think
sure.
so, yeah.
Yeah, Janet Yellen, I think. I think that's her.
I think there has been a change.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but I don't know the most recent.
Okay, so I mean, in such cases, in such positions, or if you're the president of a country, for example, right now there is tension between Pakistan and India, and like even the slightest words can have a huge impact in climbing up the tension. So in those cases, especially in
Definitely.
sensitive cases, language is a lot more powerful and a lot more dangerous, I would say. And this is a different approach, but maybe it's a thought experiment, but let's see how you feel. So I think a good command of language also makes a person more well-rounded and to a certain degree more more calmer, because I think people become aggressive when they're not able to express themselves. And you see this in kids. So I have a baby girl, and I think babies at a certain point tend to be aggressive, especially when they're not able to express what they want or what they don't want, because they don't have the language, like they don't speak at that point. So what they can do is to be aggressive, like, because it's like you want to say something, but your mouth is shut. You don't know how to say it, and you're burning with anger. Like maybe you're angry, you're mad at your mom or dad or someone.
Yeah.
Maybe you want to complain to them, but you're not able to do that. So you become aggressive. And then I think when children start to speak or start to express themselves, they get calmer. And I think I've seen that with my little daughter. So she's now able to express certain things, and I think she's happier because if she needs food, she can say that. If she needs a book or water, or if she wants to go out, she can at least say what she wants. But before that, I think she was a little bit more aggressive because what she wanted could not be expressed due to a lack of language.
Yeah, I think it happens with adults as well. People become more grounded when they have something to say and they know how to say it well. I think self-expression, we up to this point have talked about how the language that we use has an effect on the world. However, the language that we use also has an effect on ourselves. And also, I think it makes us psychologically more liberated. I think it makes us feel that way, and I think it also makes us that way. It's just not a feeling only.
Yeah.
And at the same time, it also stimulates our cognitive abilities and gives us logical tools, reasoning tools that we couldn't have accessed otherwise. It's really valuable. If you get into logic is an incredibly important department of rhetoric and language, linguistics. It is something that every human being, I think, needs to learn, because there's so much going on in the world today, propagated through media and, coming out of the mouths of politicians and and opinion leaders and other people, social activists and leaders, that are full of logical errors.
Garbage.
Yeah, I mean, another word to say, yeah, another way to express it.
Intellectual garbage.
Definitely. And we, unfortunately, eat all of this because we don't know how to deal with it. We just take it at face value, and we think that it actually makes sense just by looking at the person in front of us and maybe lending them some credibility that, God knows where it's coming from. But if you have the right tools, then you can really dissect what they're saying, and then you can extract the kind of meaning that they might not want you to see or understand, but it is really valuable for you to be able to do that. And that's another way language liberates you.
Sure, it definitely does. And I think, so I was referring to aggressiveness and the use of the command of language. And as you said, I think it's also very evident in the lives of adults and young people. So I see a lot of young people repeating the same phrases, saying the same things, and swearing a lot because they don't have much to say. It's kind of stupid. I see people swearing all the time because they don't have the words to form a full sentence. It's like one sentence, then a sort of an expletive or a swear word, and then another sentence, and then another expletive or a swear word, and then it goes on and on. So it's it sounds very primitive, and I honestly don't like it. I don't like hanging around with such people because, in such cases, I have, I guess, a very negative view of that person because it's not the kind of language or the environment I'd like to expose myself. Yeah. Because, if you're in that environment, you'll be contaminated.
Definitely. Our audience can go and refer back to our episode on toxic people.
Yeah,
that
sure.
would be, I think, a good reference. And at the same time, I totally appreciate what you're saying. And it is not only primitive, I think it also has another effect that's even more powerful. It blunts your cognitive abilities. Because every time you want to say something, and it is a very specific thing that you want to say, and you replace it with a blanket statement on a blanket and also a bad language,
foul
language containing statement, you deprive yourself of the ability to express what that thing is out there in the world. So you have just deprived your own self of the ability to define and interpret something in the world. So it is no longer as clear and lucid to you as it was before. Or if you had given yourself the chance to express it, even try to express it. Because there are so many things to say about a bad job being done, like a repair job. It's very poor. How can you say it? This person botched this job, they totally destroyed our kitchen, or they failed to even assemble a simple cupboard or something. You can use so many different...
Sure.
Yeah, but you just say this person...
He is a F moron.
Yeah, something like that. Or this person F'd up or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's all of these words, all of these expressions, all of these concepts, everything is gone.
Sure. But this might be contrary to what I said before, but sometimes I think there is magic in expletives and swear words.
Totally.
There comes a time when I find myself saying things I wouldn't normally say.
When there's nothing else left to say.
Yeah, probably when there is nothing else left to say. Because, with some people or with some situations, I try to keep my cool.
Yeah.
And try to act properly. Maybe once, twice, or 3 times in a row. And then if the same thing keeps happening, I think I kind of take relief in the world of
Yeah.
expletives, sort of.
Yeah. I mean,
This is contrary to what I say, but it's a sparing use of.
yeah,
It's
definitely.
a sparing use of.
Context matters here because I don't think
Language.
it contradicts what you said
Yeah.
previously because in literature, for example, there is extensive use of bad language and on purpose, and the way a lot of authors use bad language, it's almost poetic. I mean, I'm not,
Sure.
I'm
Yeah.
not endorsing the use of bad language.
Slang.
However, yeah, definitely. And also, it's a part of life. I mean,
Sure.
there is a lot of language out there that you don't want in your house.
This is
But-
interesting, but not using a lot of foul language, but sort of spicing up your rhetoric, but some foul language might give the impression of sincerity, especially in our culture.
Sometimes
there,
it does.
There is such a feeling.
Yeah.
It's like
Depending on the context.
It's pretty interesting. Yeah, as you said, depending on the context, like infrequent use of foul language might give you an edge.
This kind of gives me a feeling of flashback to our main theme. And actually, there's also power in the ability to
To
shock.
swear.
Yeah. Basically, to shock people
Yeah.
using language. Because, in our culture, there's a word, ayıp.
Yeah.
Something being ayıp. It's really hard to translate. It's shameful.
Yeah.
That's what it means. But shameful in a way that is not socially acceptable.
And
It's
embarrassing.
It's
kind of,
embarrassing, yeah.
at the same time.
It's embarrassing, but it's like there's so much social pressure implicit in that verb.
Yeah.
It's like embarrassing and shameful don't really do justice
Yeah.
to how heavy that thing is. No, ayıp,
Sure.
this is ayıp. So actually, that is a byproduct of our culture being a close-knit culture. A more closed culture rather than a more open culture. There are pros and cons to this, just like to every other culture. That's not the discussion here. But the thing is, this kind of makes it very easy for Turkish nationals to shock and shame each other.
Yeah.
If you are on the side of like, I'm going to use sterile language no matter what, then sometimes people can get under your skin by
Sure.
using some very, very specific words.
Yeah.
And it might get funny sometimes. It might get extremely shocking and embarrassing sometimes. It might get infuriating sometimes. But there's definitely a lot of power in being able to elicit that type of psychological response from your interlocutor, from the people that you speak to.
There is a different side to all this discussion. So when we first started, I was really considering the use of professional language, like being very fluent, being able to express yourself, like using professional words. It's like the type of language that a highly educated person would use. But as a means of power and as a source of power, language can also be used in very different ways. So, for example, sometimes one type of language would work with a specific audience, but you might need a very different type of language for a different audience. So I find myself experiencing this, especially when I visit my hometown. So, for example, when I'm here talking to you or to our audience, I am more inclined to go into intellectual debates or maybe use more abstract language. But then when I'm in my village with the elders, with the people, like the locals, like the discussions, the topics would differ because it's a different environment with a different background. So my language, my manners would change accordingly, because if it didn't, then I would kind of stand out, not in a great way, sort of.
Yeah.
So, or the type of language that you use with your close friends is different from the type of language you use at work or with strangers. So it's also necessary to be able to sort of dose your language based on the
Definitely.
context.
Definitely.
So to sort of shape it, to brighten it, to darken it,
Yeah.
to make it more elaborate, or to make it lighter. So if you're talking to a kid, so I mean, being or having command of the language does not necessarily means forming the longest sentence. It means being able to water down your language when needed, or make it more elaborate when needed, or make it more into slang when needed. So
Yeah.
it's like being able to use language different in different contexts, and I really enjoy being able to do that. Like, for example, like the discussions we're having here are very different from the discussions when I go and ship a book, or when I talk to, I don't know, a customer care representative, or when I'm buying food, or different types of people, different types of situations. So I think being good with language, or having command of a language, really requires being able to master different contexts, not just one.
Definitely. And flexibility, that's the key term, I think, here.
Yeah.
And also register is an important concept here.
Definitely.
Because context dictates the register that you're going to use in your language uses and choices. And I think this also is also linked to the concept of power and language, because language is a means to an end. It's not really the end itself. In most cases, it isn't. And in that regard, I think, for one, that's part of the reason why language has to become totally transparent, just like a window glass, so that you can use it the most effectively. Because it needs to get out of the way so that you can focus on what you actually want to say, on the meaning, on the message. And I think it also has to do with how you need to expose yourself to life so that you can attain the kind of power that language can lead you to. I think that's really important. If you if you weren't visiting your relatives and your family back in your hometown every year, maybe several times every year, then you wouldn't be having the kind of discussions that you can only have there and nowhere else, with the elders, with the kids, with the relatives. Yeah. And just like you mentioned, you're going through life and you're meeting all of these people, some service encounters, some relationships, everything, intertwined. And you are having all of these life experiences, and all of these, having these experiences and adapting to those contexts, that's what allows you to develop the kinds of languages, those little intricate differences in register that enables you to get what you want or be successful on general terms in those contexts. So being exposed to life, life exposure, experience, that has a lot to do with cultivating language and therefore attaining more power.
Sure. Well, I think we were at least partly able to demonstrate or prove that language is a source of power. I mean, I personally believe it, and I guess you're on the same side.
Yeah.
You would agree. So, well, I guess that's it for now. I've pretty much covered everything I wanted to say. I mean, honestly, I did not have a list of the things to say, but as the conversation kept on, different points came to my mind, and I was able to talk about them, and I think they provided good opportunities for discussion. Do you have anything else to say?
Well, that was a beautiful discussion. Thanks.
Yeah, it was. Well, guys, see you in the next episode, and bye for now.
Bye-bye.